Cheat meals, why you shouldn't use them, and the 3 alternatives I'd suggest. Firstly, I hate cheat meals. I hate the terminology around it. However, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you as to why you shouldn't use them, because I think for the most part, it's people just don't know what to do instead. And like, I get it. I've done so many diets kind of where you just want that little bit of a release, that kind of, you know, something on a weekend to look forward to. But I don't think we should always be using food as our reward system, if that makes sense. And I'm going to come on to a little bit why we shouldn't use cheat meals, but I don't want anyone to take this as me lecturing them or telling them why they shouldn't do something, because I think that people, most of the time, not everyone, are coming from a good place when they say they're having a cheat meal or a cheat day. And I'm going to show you some alternatives and different ways to do it instead. So the first reason is you are creating a bad or an unhealthy relationship with food. We shouldn't be completely eliminating foods altogether from your diet, and we certainly shouldn't be restricting ourselves every single week and then having this kind of one evening or one day where we just binge and go crazy and eat whatever we want. It's not creating a very good reward cycle for yourself, and long term it's just creating a bad and an unhealthy relationship with food. The second reason why we shouldn't is we shouldn't be viewing foods as good or bad, cheat or not cheat. It should be more or less nutritious. So let me give you an example. A piece of broccoli, for instance. A piece of broccoli's got a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals in it. It's got a lot of fiber in it. There's not a lot of calories, a lot of food volume. This would be considered food that's more nutritious. If we took a chocolate bar, for example, it's going to be a small amount of food. There's going to be a lot of calories in it. It's not going to fill you up for a very long time. It's going to be classed as something less nutritious. It's got a lot of the things that we probably don't want to be having in large consumption. So we need to move away from viewing foods as good or bad, but instead viewing them as more or less nutritious, and not completely eliminating foods from your diet. Like, your diet should include all foods, and anything you want to eat, you should be able to try and make it work within your nutrition targets, whatever they may be. But when we start viewing foods as good or bad and completely eliminating foods from our diet, that's when we fall into the cheat meal cycle, which then potentially could become that binge starve cycle, and then, you know, potentially a binge eating, which is what we want to avoid. So the last reason as well is, if we are dieting and we're trying to lose weight, we should be trying to create something called a calorie deficit. Now, when we have a cheat meal or a cheat day, whichever one it is you're going to use, usually that means that we're eating a lot of food that's untracked, which is fine. You can have untracked meals and still be losing weight, but it will often be a case of where we're going to go crazy, where whenever I hear the word cheat meal or cheat day, I'm thinking of, you know, like the Rock's plate of cookies, burgers, pizzas, you know, and just going crazy and not having any idea of how many calories or macronutrients or whatever it is we're consuming. Well, if you've been dieting all week and restricting your calories and losing weight, and then we get to the weekend and then all of a sudden we have this massive intake of calories that we don't know how many we've eaten or anything, well, then we've kind of just blown out that calorie deficit we've created through the week. And we're always just going to be chasing his tail then every Monday to Friday, trying to get his weight back down, because on the weekend we've had a massive cheat meal and we've had a big influx of calories. So we've just ruined that calorie deficit. And then we get into this cycle of, you know, this binge starve cycle every week and can't understand why we're not losing weight. So I would avoid using cheat meals or cheat days. Now, what are the alternatives? So the first one is the one I'd probably recommend for most people, and that is something called tracking tiers. So let me give you an example of this. For a lot of my weight loss clients, we'll probably just be tracking calories, protein, and fiber. But if they're going to have a meal out at the weekend, for instance, well, I might say, right, okay, don't track your protein and fiber at this meal, don't worry about it, and let's just focus on calories. Because then the calories that were dedicated to the protein that we were eating can be dedicated to more foods that are going to be potentially higher in carbohydrates and fats. Because if we are going to go out for a meal and enjoy ourselves, I'm not saying that you can't have protein or something like that, but the likelihood is, if we're eating out, the foods that we're going to be eating are going to have a higher carbohydrate and fat content, which means that if we're then to still try and hit protein and calories, we're probably going to be over our calorie target. So just by removing the protein and fat and then just saying, right, you've got your calorie target, just try not to go over that, then it allows us more flexibility in our diet. So that is the first one I would recommend, is something called tracking tiers. And if you are tracking your macronutrients, rather than tracking your macronutrients that day, I'd maybe just track your calories, try not to go over your calories. If you're tracking calories, protein and fiber, get rid of protein and fiber and just track calories that day. The second one, and I have made a video previously on this, and it is calorie cycling. So, calorie cycling is essentially viewing your calories as a weekly target rather than a daily target. So it might be a case of every Sunday you have a look at the following week, you know you're going out for a meal on, let's say, Friday and Saturday night, you look at the restaurant beforehand, you see what meal you're going to have, so you dedicate an extra 800 calories on Friday and Saturday for those days, and you reduce Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Sunday's calorie target down a little bit. So it might be a case of, let's say, I don't know, you have 2,500 calories on Friday and 2,500 calories on Saturday, but then Sunday and the rest of the weekdays might be at 1,600 calories, for example. So you've got that bit of an extra buffer to play with. It might be a case of that you're at work one day on a Wednesday, you get invited out for a meal or drinks after work, you end up going over your calories a little bit, so what you do the following day is just reduce your calories by 20% to try and make up for that surplus that was created the day before. So calorie cycling is basically just managing your calories so we don't go over your weekly target. The third option we have is something called refeed days. Now, refeed days I would only take and use if you are in a calorie deficit. So if you are dieting, because that's the only time that you need to use a refeed day anyway. But essentially what would happen on this day is it's one day per week where we're just taking calories up to maintenance. So it is a little bit different to calorie cycling. Refeed day, we're just taking calories up to maintenance levels. Now, in terms of using the refeed day, it just acts as that little bit of a psychological break, just knowing that one day per week you might take it on your hardest training day or when you've got a social event or activity on. Right, that one day per week I'm going to take calories up to maintenance on that day. You might even bring in the tracking tiers with it as well, that you're not going to aim for a protein or your macro targets, you might just aim for your calorie target. And it just gives you that little bit of flexibility and freedom and something to look forward to every week. So let me just recap cheat meals. I would not recommend using them, and the reason why is it creates a bad relationship with food. We shouldn't be viewing foods as good or bad, but instead more or less nutritious. And if we are trying to work on creating a calorie deficit, if you're going to have a cheat meal or a cheat day, you're going to absolutely smash it out of the park anyway and just ruin that calorie deficit you've created. The alternatives is to just try and make these foods fit within your calorie or macronutrient targets, and that would be using tracking tiers. So for instance, say you are aiming for macronutrient targets on that day, we might just aim for a calorie target instead, but fit in the foods that you might be going out for a meal or something like that into your diet. We might instead do something called calorie cycling, where we're looking at our weekly calories rather than daily. So what we might do is instead know that we're going out for a meal on Saturday, so we might dedicate more calories to that day on Saturday and then reduce the other days. We may also look at doing something called refeed days, which is where we take one or more days, depending upon your body fat levels, up to maintenance per week, and then that will allow us to try and fit some more foods into our diet. Hopefully that's summarized why you shouldn't use cheat meals and the alternatives to do so instead. Again, if you've got any questions, guys, please leave them in the comments below or shoot me a message on Instagram.